Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if. Chapter 35. Red Dawn. A sword was an extension of the arm. It went where it was guided. In the hands of a master, it was a paintbrush. Blood was its paint and the body was its canvas. Naruto was far from being a master, but with Samui's guidance, he was getting there. He never handed over a sword blade first, even if it was wooden. He made sure to swing with his whole arm, maintaining a grip that was firm, but not tight. He coated his sword with a thin layer of chakra to sharpen its blade and reduce wear and tear. Slowly, but surely, he honed his potential at swordplay, and when he mastered the basics, the time came to choose his personal weapon. Samui had taught him to wield a tanto and a katana, stressing that the most important factors in choosing a specific sword were the range he wanted to have in a fight and the type of sword he felt most comfortable using. The tanto was a short, single-edged sword, longer than a kunai, far shorter than a katana, and capable of being wielded with one hand. It was perfect for close-range assassination and sufficient in fending off swords with greater reach. A katana had a long, thin blade. It was best suited in controlling distance with its superior range and performing swift, clean kills. However, the katana's length was a hindrance in close-quarters combat. This was why Samui used both swords, so she could switch between them when the need arose. However, Naruto's fighting style was different. If he couldn't use his speed, shadow clones or genjutsu to get out of the way, and a kunai or taijutsu wouldn't suffice, that was when he planned to use a sword. With that in mind, he chose the tanto. A good choice, Samui had said. I also prefer it. After that, his training intensified. Whenever they weren't on a mission, Naruto trained. If they were resting at camp, Naruto performed a few kata. Samui was a meticulous teacher, drilling precision into his stance, his swings, and his footwork until he moved like a well-oiled machine. She was blunt with her criticism, but never unfair. Then came the sparring. A good way for Samui to test what he had learned and beat him into the dirt. He was faster than she was, but she put in a lot of physical strength behind her blows and punished any openings she saw with brutal efficiency. Losing was discouraging, but it helped him learn, and 5 months of training had paid off in spades. Their latest spar was the first time they used actual swords, taking place in a clearing close to a hotel in the Land of Fire. It was a sign that Samui trusted him, and he was pleased to have come this far, as live steel carried the risk of accidental injury. He could heal injuries off better than Samui could, but missions could come at any time, so it was better not to take any risks. Tanto clashed as Naruto swatted away Samui's slash, ducking quickly to avoid her heel whipping his jaw. Nothing was banned when it came to kenjutsu, and at such close range, using taijutsu was encouraged to catch opponents off guard. Since this was meant to train his skills with the blade, all jutsu were off limits for the spar. Although, Samui did teach him how to transition between swordplay and ninjutsu so that he wouldn't be affected in a real fight. Just as Samui was about to bring her heel down, Naruto swept out her front leg. She landed on her feet with a cartwheel. He slipped around her lunging fist, and when he moved to grab her arm, she plunged her tanto behind her, forcing him to jump away. Anticipation, situational awareness, adaptability, all of these were skills that a master of kenjutsu needed to have. While he possessed these skills as a master of genjutsu, mastering the blade pushed these skills in a different direction. Fortunately, he didn't need to master it, he just needed to be proficient. Naruto moved in low, crashing his forearm against her sword arm, then pointing the tip of his tanto at her neck. "Do you yield?" Naruto asked. Samui's tanto hung dangerously close to his neck. She'd switched to a reverse grip, and her lead foot was in between his feet, free hand poised to knock him off balance. The question was, how quickly could she do it before he stabbed her? "We'll call this a draw," Samui said, retracting her blade. "You've improved, Naruto." Naruto smiled, and sheathed his tanto in a charcoal gray scabbard. "I have a good teacher." Samui nodded, before she pursed her lips. "I'm going to visit the hot springs. When I return, we'll go over the spar in detail." "Cool," Naruto said. He watched her leave with a sway in her stride and shook himself after staring for a bit too long, heading over to their hotel room. This was the closest he got to beating Samui in their spars. It would be a different story if he could use ninjutsu or genjutsu, but his improvement was clear as day. Thanks to her tutelage, he had finally incorporated kenjutsu into his fighting style. It would take time for Samui to return from the hot springs, so he decided to lounge around on his bed. Samui's breasts strained her shoulders and lower back, putting her under undue stress. Taking a nice soak after a mission or strenuous workout helped her body and mind relax. As such, Naruto tried to find hotels or inns that had some kind of hot water bath attached, and sometimes, he even paid for them to ensure that Samui was in tip-top shape. He also got to enjoy the hot springs himself, if he felt like doing so. It was one of the reasons why Samui had grown closer to him. They wouldn't be sharing a room if they were merely teammates. Of course, he'd also spent 5 straight months with Samui, something that was still pretty hard to believe. Other than Jiraiya, it was the longest he'd spent together with anyone. Even with Kurenai, his mission to the Land of Waves or his search for Tsunade had separated them. With Samui, however, they traveled all across the elemental nations, completing several missions and earning praise from their clients. While they never got to save another country or rescue another princess, their missions ran the gamut from information gathering to assassination, testing them in various ways. Samui walked inside the hotel room, towel wrapped around her curves. She reached her bed and immediately dried her blonde hair before combing it. Once she was done, she lay flat on the bed, revealing her back to him as her towel draped around her rear and upper thighs. She gazed at him with piercing blue eyes. The word that could best describe Samui was reserved. She could talk a lot when it came to something she was passionate about, like history or modern technology. Most of the time, a wordless gesture or a short sentence was enough to convey her wants. And what she wanted right now was a back massage. He rolled off his bed and grabbed the bottle of oil from her nightstand, climbing on top of her shapely hips. He took in a deep breath, slathered the oil on his palms and rubbed them together. Then he got to work. He began by kneading the muscles in her lower back, focusing on the effort she put into strengthening her back and shoulders and abs, how she constantly tried to find solutions to her problems. About 3 months ago, Naruto had offered to give Samui a back massage in the aftermath of a tough mission, one that had left her barely able to function. She reluctantly agreed, with the caveat that she remained fully clothed and sat upright. That was fine with him, since he didn't want to be tempted or push her too far. Even if she tensed from his touch and didn't seem to enjoy it, she was limber after he was finished. A week later, she asked him for a massage, and eventually, it became a regular routine. As she got more comfortable with him, she allowed him to touch her back while she lay down. Last week, she exposed her bare back to him and fixed him with her penetrating stare, making it clear what she wanted him to do. It was something he didn't want to test, and he was about to refuse, but she said something that stuck with him since. "It's fine, I trust you." It was that confirmation that allowed him to caress her aching muscles, and it was yet another thing he had Jiraiya to thank for. While he'd participated in Jiraiya's massage lessons to indulge the old perv, it was a skill that had proven to be useful. Finished with her lower back, Naruto's hands trailed up her spine and worked on her shoulders. Finding the right balance between a rough massage and a soft one was key, and the pleased sounds that came from her mouth let him know he was successful. One time, she'd fallen asleep during his massage and he thought he messed up until he noticed the peaceful expression that had enveloped her face. She really was beautiful. That was why he wouldn't let himself enjoy these massages. He didn't want to go down that road of temptation, not until he returned home and settled things once and for all. Eventually, Naruto finished massaging her back. He set the bottle of oil on the nightstand and sat on his own bed. The oil soothed the skin and left little residue, which was perfect for the both of them. "Thank you," Samui said, glancing at him. Naruto smiled. "You're welcome. Are we going to talk about that spar?" As soon as I've dressed up. A puff of smoke emerged, and Naruto held a hand out, examining the chakra signature that suddenly appeared at the foot of his bed. "Hey there," Naruto said, waving his hand at a small red messenger toad. The toad presented a scroll. "Greetings, Naruto. I wish I came bearing glad tidings." Naruto grabbed the scroll, opening it and reading its contents aloud. "The Akatsuki have abducted the Cage." His heart lurched. They should have had more time. According to Jiraiya's intel, the Akatsuki weren't supposed to have fully mobilized yet. Gaara was abducted at night by Deidara and Sasori of the Red Sand. I'm too far away to help you out on such short notice, but Tsunade has dispatched 2 teams to investigate. You and Samui will rendezvous with them at the border separating the Land of Wind and the Land of Rivers. Your mission is to assist in recovering Gaara from the Akatsuki, and if possible, capture Deidara and or Sasori. Do what you need to do to ensure that this mission ends in success. Jiraiya's signature was on the bottom. Naruto breathed in deeply, nodding at the toad. Once it departed, he stared at Samui, averting his gaze when he saw her dressing up. It was a good thing that he hadn't removed his gear. The Akatsuki had finally come knocking, and he was ready to answer their call. Leaves rustled, limbs creaked, air gusted. Naruto emerged out of thin air, landing in an open field between his enemy and his allies. Kakashi stared ahead with both eyes. Sakura's fists were clenched, muscles coiled to strike. The old woman that was with them had a calculating gleam in her eye, while the brown pug looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. As for the enemy, he was tall, thin, clad in a black cloak emblazoned with red clouds. His black hair was wrapped in a ponytail, and with his sensor, Naruto saw 2 active Sharingan. The leaf symbol on his forehead protector was slashed through the middle. Naruto Uzumaki, Itachi Uchiha said. We finally meet. Naruto smirked, putting on an aloof air. Well, I am special. Samui was at his back, granting him confidence he sorely needed. He was standing face to face with the man who had massacred the Uchiha clan, a genjutsu master without peer. A long time ago, he considered Itachi to be the last man he ever wanted to meet on the battlefield, but he had grown since then, and Itachi's chakra reserves were far too small for him to be the real deal. Are you guys okay? Naruto asked. As okay as one can be in times like these, Kakashi said, body primed to move at a moment's notice. Apparently, Itachi was okay with letting them talk. Was he that confident in his skill? We're about to engage, Sakura said, staring ahead with a startling amount of focus. Careful, Sakura, Kakashi said. Stick to your role. Heed your teacher's words, Itachi said. What would Sasuke say if you perished before your reunion? Sakura took a step forward, and the earth shook beneath her feet. He'll be speechless after I bring him your head. Naruto wasn't willing to risk seeing Itachi's reaction, but the scowl on Sakura's face wasn't so surprising. Her bravado was. Very well. Itachi burst into motion. Naruto deflected the shuriken flying at him with a burst of wind and raced ahead of Kakashi, blocking Itachi's kunai with his tanto. Itachi pushed against him with the kunai, but Naruto kept his eyes closed, seeing him with his sensor and avoiding the Sharingan's thrall. He jumped back, and wove around Itachi's horde of fiery bullets, cursing the lack of water on the grassy field. One bullet had come close to him, but he was ready, and a stream of fire caught the bullet in midair, extinguishing it. You possess some skill, Itachi said. He pointed at him with his finger. However, you will have to show more than that if you hope to survive. In spite of the danger and the tension that hung in the air, testing his might against one of the strongest ninja in the world was exhilarating. Naruto tossed a kunai that landed square at Itachi's chest. It went right through, but Itachi smiled. Disappointing, Itachi said in Sarutobi's voice. It's better this way. Now you won't be a danger to anyone. I taught you better, Naruto, Kurenai said. But I'm not surprised. You're nothing without me. Naruto grit his teeth and broke through the illusion in an instant. It was a dirty trick that he'd use if he had the chance, but it was a trick that wouldn't work on him. Itachi was in his guard, kunai outstretched, but Sakura was there, too. A moment passed before she punched Itachi, and the top half of his body exploded in a fountain of blood. It hung in the air for a few seconds. Then the blood transformed into a murder of black crows, joining the crows that emerged from the clone Naruto killed to coalesce a few meters away. Itachi reformed, completely unharmed, while Naruto reunited with his allies, Sakura close behind. It appears that you might be more than a nuisance, Sakura Haruno, Itachi said. Naruto, how are you doing? Sakura asked. I'm fine, Naruto said. You holding up okay? Sakura rolled her shoulders. I'll be a lot better once the target's been eliminated. Itachi hadn't moved a muscle. I see that your prowess at genjutsu isn't merely reputation, Naruto. I wonder how the Blade of Illusion would fare against the Mangekyo Sharingan's unrivaled power. Don't try him, and don't attack him on your own, Kakashi said. Itachi is too dangerous to be taken lightly. Sakura nodded, but Naruto looked directly into the Sharingan. Normally, I'd agree, Kakashi-sensei, but the real Itachi is far away. This guy we're facing is nothing more than a clone. Before Kakashi could respond, Naruto appeared in front of Itachi, Rasengan swirling in his palm. Next time, bring me your best, or don't bother coming. He shredded Itachi's torso. The body fell to the ground, and Itachi's form flickered away, revealing the body of a dead sand ninja. Disgusting. Samui had joined him at his side, frowning in distaste. He was stalling us, Naruto said. We'll have to catch up. Ready to go. Yeah. Naruto turned away from the Akatsuki's unfortunate victim and focused his chakra. Going somewhere? Kakashi asked, from right behind him. Naruto turned around and faced his old teacher. There's no time to waste. I'm aware of that, Kakashi said, headband covering his eye once more. He hadn't changed a bit on the outside, but on the inside, his chakra reserves had increased dramatically. We'll head out together, understand? Gaara was in danger, and with every minute wasted, the chances of rescuing him slipped further and further away. However, he was working on a team, and Kakashi was more experienced than he was. It would be better to face the Akatsuki with greater numbers. Yes, Kakashi-sensei. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Naruto? Sakura asked, smiling at him. It made her whole face glow. Naruto returned the smile. Yeah, it has. Sakura's pink hair was still long and lush, flowing freely in the wind. Her green eyes were still dazzling, and her forehead was still clear, with a red headband wrapped at the crown of her head. However, she'd swapped out the bright red dress for a tight-fitting dark red shirt that had a similar white pattern and black shorts, showing off her slender curves and muscular physique. Black gloves covered her fists and black sandal boots cut off at her knees. Chakra was being funneled to a point at her forehead, yet her chakra reserves were still refined, potent. He was given a stark reminder of the crush he had on her a long time ago. Where'd you learn how to fight like that? Naruto asked. Lady Tsunade taught me, Sakura said. Really? How is GR, the Hokage, doing these days? Sakura smiled. Really well. I wouldn't have come this far without her. That's good to hear, Naruto said. Tsunade had been infamous for her monstrous strength, and judging from how she nearly killed Itachi's clone in one hit, it seemed like Sakura had learned Tsunade's secret. Who's your teammate? Sakura asked. Samui set a hand on her hip. I'm Samui, from the Hidden Cloud. Sakura smiled. I'm Sakura. Nice to meet you. You too. The old woman was still watching him. She wore a black long-sleeved outfit underneath a white poncho that many from the Hidden Sand wore. A dark brown headband was wrapped around gray hair tied up in a bun. While this was the first time he'd seen her, he had a feeling she was the Hidden Sand's esteemed elder Chiyo. Kakashi, I still have the scent, the pug said, startling Naruto with his grizzled voice. He was used to talking toads, but not talking dogs. Kakashi nodded. Lead the way, Pakun. But Kakashi trusted him, and if it meant saving Gaara, that was good enough for him. The newly formed team traveled towards their destination, Pakun leading the way as they jumped through the trees. Naruto trailed close behind, not wanting to waste a single second. Kakashi caught up with him, and it caused a flicker of nostalgia to pass through him. It was just like old times, it seemed. How have you been, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked, using the honorific as a sign of respect. Not too bad, all things considered. Silence fell between them as they continued to travel, but Naruto had long gotten used to it. You've grown, Naruto. He said it like it was obvious, because it was the truth. Naruto had gone through personal ordeals and harsh training, and he came out stronger, going on to complete plenty of missions with ease. Not only had he grown, he was confident in his skill and who he wanted to be. I'm glad that I did, Naruto said. So am I. More time passed, then Kakashi came up to his side. Did you find what you were looking for? The serious tone and the way his voice rose just above a whisper made it clear what he was alluding to. I did, Naruto said. Kakashi sighed. I see. For what it's worth, you never needed watching. Naruto nodded, stiffly. Thank you. Kakashi might not have known who was watching him, or how much finding out had hurt him, but he still appreciated what he said, a whole lot. He scanned the area. Samui was watching their rear, while Sakura was around the middle and Chio was out of earshot. It was as good a time as any. You know, Kakashi-sensei, my dad was a pretty cool guy. Kakashi's lone eye widened, before closing in a smile. He was the coolest. He'd be so proud of you. A strained smile crossed Naruto's face. I hope so. I wish I could have told you more, he said, shame lacing his words. Would you have told me who my dad was, if you could? Yes. Naruto's smile grew. Then don't worry about it. It was Sarutobi's choice to keep this from him, not Kakashi's. Kakashi's immediate response proved that thus was more than wishful thinking. Kakashi, aren't you going to introduce me? Chio asked, having reached them after their conversation trailed off. It's an honor to meet you, Lady Chio, Naruto said. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I've heard many things about you. Good things, I'm sure, Chio said. Naruto smiled. Thanks to Temari, Naruto was fully aware of her prowess as a master of poisons and puppets, so seeing her on a mission of this stature was a surprise. She was supposed to be retired. I'm surprised to see you with us, Naruto said, vocalizing his thought. There's someone I want to see, she said, and she left it at that. It took the team nearly a full day to reach the destination that Pakun was leading them to. Even running at full speed, there was a long distance to cover, and Naruto couldn't go at full tilt without leaving everyone behind, or worse, burning through his reserves. He had a lot of energy, but it wasn't limitless. Frustrating as it was that he couldn't save Gaara right now, he had to be patient. On the way there, Kakashi told the team why Gaara had been captured by the Akatsuki, and that Naruto himself was in danger because he was a Jinchuriki. More importantly, he found out that Chio had been the one to seal Shukaku, the one-tailed beast, into Gaara. He was careful not to respond. There was a time and place to do so, and it wasn't in the middle of a mission. The least he could do was tune her out so that he didn't have to hear her excuses. Samui had deigned to join him after Kakashi had told his tale. For the majority of their journey, they had occupied different parts of the formation, so they didn't get much chance to interact. You really are a Jinchuriki, Samui said. Naruto nodded. He wasn't surprised that she'd been suspicious, since he'd used the Nine Tails chakra on more than one occasion, and he'd spent time meditating to control how he reacted to its potent, chaotic chakra. Besides that, her sensei was Killer Bee, a Jinchuriki just like him. I'll protect you, she said. Naruto blinked, before a smile bloomed on his face. Thanks, Samui. Even though she was a ninja from a foreign land with no reason to be nothing more than professional, she'd been good to him. He was grateful for her acceptance and her support. It was only a matter of time before Naruto sensed 4 different chakra signatures. He considered racing ahead, but their arrival was imminent, and if the Akatsuki were around, he needed all the support he'd get. They wouldn't be fighting to waste his time, they'd fight to break him. A large torii gate appeared across a wide river that the ninja were standing on, waiting for them. It took no effort at all for the team to close the gap and join them. Late as always, Kakashi. Might Guy said. He hadn't changed at all, but that was to be expected for a ninja as seasoned as him. You know me, Guy, I like to make a big entrance, Kakashi said. Naruto glanced at Guy's teammates. Lee had grown taller and stronger, but otherwise, he was the same. Tenten was dressed in a white long-sleeved blouse with red trim and red hakama pants, a massive green scroll attached to her back, and had her hair done up in her twin bun style. The biggest surprise was that Neji Hyuga was with them. A single black glove covered his right arm up to the elbow, and he was dressed in a loose white shirt with matching pants, a dark gray apron covering his waist. His chakra thrummed with the warmth and vitality of fire, and his white eyes exuded calm. So you guys are our reinforcements? Naruto asked. Guy smiled with sparkling teeth. That's right. A team like theirs had years of experience and camaraderie, and since everyone was skilled in some kind of close-range or weapon-based combat, they were a force to be reckoned with. It is good to see you, Naruto, Lee said, smiling just as widely as his sensei. Tenten smiled, too. Yeah, it's been so long. How are you doing? Naruto smiled. Awesome. It's great to see you guys. It was easier to smile now. Koyuki had shown him that he didn't have to keep up a cold mask all the time to hide his pain. He could smile and be genuine without putting his heart on his sleeve. Is she with you, Naruto? Neji asked, staring at Samui. The memory of their last interaction, where she defended her teammate from being killed at Neji's hand, struck him like a freight train. He was about to defend her, but he saw Samui take a step forward. Yes, Samui said, how are you doing? Neji's face was a stoic mask. Well, you have no need to fear, I no longer mean to do you harm. Cool, she said, but Naruto wasn't imagining the frostiness in her eyes. He stared at the boulder and noticed two things about it. There was a tag on it, and his sensor became fuzzy if he tried to stare past it. There's a barrier around the seal, Naruto said. He stretched out his sensor. All of the meditation he did over the past 5 months helped him focus his vision, expanding his range to 600 meters. His sensor let him see in every direction all around his body, with no natural blind spots. When he focused, he could stare through walls and other obstructions, and his sensor would let him know about any chakra signatures on the other side. The key restriction was that it required active focus if he wanted to make the most of his range. Furthermore, the more he expanded his range, the more chakra he had to expend. Doing so made him a target if he used it for too long. That was why he developed the 25-meter zone of vision, which automatically informed him of any chakra signatures in the area. It barely needed any chakra to function. In any case, he could only detect 2 seals in what looked like a 5-point barrier seal. Neji, can you see any other seals? Naruto asked. Neji nodded, and the veins around his eyes bulged as he activated the Byakugan. Yes, there's one on a rock 500 meters northeast, another on a tree 350 meters southeast, a third on a rocky cliff 650 meters northwest, and the last inside a grove 800 meters southwest. Naruto nodded, and immediately made 4 shadow clones that raced away to reach the seals. Thanks, Neji. Once my clones pull off the seals, we can get inside. Lee laughed. That is very impressive, Naruto. It sure makes our lives easier, Tenten said. This is no time to get complacent, Guy said, frowning sternly at the boulder. Our enemy is just ahead, so we should take this time to prepare for battle. It was good advice. Nobody would make a barrier of this strength if they didn't have something to hide, and the 5-point seal wasn't something a traditional 4-ninja squad could disable, assuming none of them could create tangible clones. Even if they could, the tags were far away and hard to find, which would only waste time unless the squad had a powerful sensor. Clearly, this wasn't something he could do alone. It was another reminder that he couldn't do everything on his own, but it was a reminder he was glad to have. Memories appeared in his mind, made from clones of the shadow clones he'd sent. My clones are at the tags, Naruto said. What should we do now? You'll have to rip off all 5 tags at the same time, Kakashi said. Then we'll enter in the buttonhook formation. Sound good to you, Guy? Guy gave a firm nod. Neji should be the perfect lookout. Should I break the boulder? Sakura tightened a glove. Allow me, Guy-sensei. Their plan had been set, and Naruto reached the tag in short order. A dispelled clone let his other clones know what to do, and on a count of 3, Naruto ripped off the slip of paper. Jets of water rocketed upwards as Sakura dashed forward. Chakra formed at the tip of her fist, and in one earth-shattering punch, Sakura reduced the boulder to rubble, smashing open an entrance to the cave. Naruto jumped off the boulder once Sakura made contact. When he landed on the water, he faced her and saw the pleased smile on her face, the glint of pride in her eyes. He thought it was bravado that she'd shown when she threatened Itachi, but seeing her now, his assumption was off base. It wasn't just bravado, it was confidence forged from a determination to succeed, real confidence built from overcoming failure and adversity and tragedy that would break a lesser person. It was the type of confidence that could mold a person into something inconceivable. And it was clear that just like him, Sakura had propelled herself to whole new heights. The 9 ninja team moved inside the cave. Guy, Chio, Sakura and Tenten entered from the left, while Kakashi, Lee, Samui and Naruto entered from the right. Neji was keeping watch on the outside. Naruto immediately witnessed Gaara laying on the cave's floor, eyes closed. And somebody was sitting on his body. So, you finally joined us, the man said. HMPH. Took you long enough. He was from the Hidden Rock. Long blonde hair hid the left side of his face, and he wore a black cloak with red clouds. He was a dead man. Naruto maintained a cool mask. He just had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. What's wrong? The blonde man said. The Jinchuriki's right here, but unfortunately for you, he's already dead. He rapped Gaara's face with his knuckle twice, and Gaara didn't twitch. No, he was wrong, he had to be, but when Naruto scanned Gaara's chakra, he found nothing. Gaara was dead. They were too late. He took a step forward, teeth grinding against one another. Samui set a hand on his shoulder, and when he whirled around to face her, she shook her head. He saw the concern tinged in her eyes and forced himself to calm down, before he could rip him to shreds. I'm guessing you're the Jinchuriki, the blonde man said, staring straight at him with slanted blue eyes devoid of empathy. What do you think, Sasori, my man? If the hunched man was Sasori, the blonde one must have been Deidara. The only thing that the black cloak on Sasori's body didn't cover was his face, and his mouth was covered by a mask shaped like a beard. His hair was coiled in 5 black spikes. I think I'll take hold of the former cage, Sasori said in a clicking, guttural voice. His corpse still holds some value, since the Jinchuriki will stop at nothing to take him back. Deidara grunted. You sure you want to do that? What's your point? A sly smirk crossed Deidara's face. It might be hard for you to hear this, but I want to take care of the Jinchuriki. Look, we have a quota, and we're going to stick to it, Sasori said, glaring at his partner. You've already taken down one Jinchuriki. Don't push your luck. Under normal circumstances, I'd let you do your thing, Deidara said. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't test myself against all the ninja in this room. After all, an artist must seek ever greater stimulation if his senses are to remain sharp. HMPH. You'd be wasting your time, Sasori said. Would I? I heard the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki was pretty strong, and he's brought along copy ninja Kakashi and the Leaf's verdant beast. All I see are canvases worthy of displaying my art. Sasori's scorpion tail twitched. Art? You call those pyrotechnics of yours art? Art is beauty captured and left behind for posterity. Can you capture an explosion? Deidara smirked. You can capture the moment. But that moment is transient, and that is why it isn't art, because art is eternal beauty. Naruto didn't know what was more infuriating. The fact that these two were arguing about art, or that they weren't remotely afraid of the ninja assembled to defeat them. Would an eternal explosion count as eternal beauty? Deidara asked. Tenten, Guy whispered, and Tenten flung 5 shuriken that whistled through the air, nearly invisible to the naked eye. However, Sasori's tail deflected all 5 shuriken, and he hadn't moved an inch. If you could create an eternal explosion, then maybe your point of view would have some merit, Sasori said, like he hadn't been attacked. Deidara grunted. You wound me. We are both artists, and such, I respect your point of view. I can see the appeal in an everlasting structure that leaves its viewers in awe and incites poignant reflection on the nature of your creation, but is my art lesser because of its transience? Yes, Sasori said. Memories are fleeting, and like your explosions, the memory that your art created will fade into the void to lay forgotten for eternity. Is the point of your art for its audience to cling to a memory that will evade their grasp and erode with time? No, Deidara said. His palm began to move, like it was chewing something. The purpose of art is to incite reaction, and what greater reaction is there than to create a moment that will last for a lifetime? A moment that can be remade repeatedly, for eternity. HMPH. Well, I don't agree, my friend. I told you you wouldn't like hearing what I had to say. Sasori growled. Are you trying to make me angry, Deidara? His tail inched towards Deidara, a purple liquid seeping off its tip. Why don't you tell me about your art again? Deidara clenched his hand, and released a bird made of white clay. It rapidly expanded, and swallowed Gaara in its mouth. Art is an explosion, and while art might be eternal beauty to some, your grotesque puppetry isn't. HMPH. Sasori's scorpion tail lunged at Deidara, but he jumped on its head and took flight. Naruto's eyes were narrowed to slits as he tried to figure out how to bring Deidara back. But he needn't have worried, as Lee stepped up. A whirlwind of dust kicked up as Lee sprinted along the wall of the cave, launched off it and spun in midair, catching Deidara by surprise with a cry of, "Leaf Hurricane!" and knocking Deidara back to earth. Naruto disappeared from view, racing towards Deidara before he could get up. Sasori unleashed a barrage of Senbon straight at him, but he was able to avoid them. He was aware that the Senbon were hurtling towards the others, but Samui was there, and she created a wide wall of fire that burned the Senbon to ash. "Naruto!" Kakashi shouted. He was immediately alert to the Senbon that Sasori had just launched, flying at a far faster speed than the previous batch. Naruto sucked in his breath and blew out a large amount of wind, deflecting them all. Then he grabbed Deidara's throat and shoved him into the cavern wall. "You think you can sit on Gaara's body and get away with it?" Naruto said, scowling at the mad bomber. "I have and I will," Deidara said, a wild gleam in his eyes. "But you're forgetting something, aren't you?" Naruto tightened his grip against Deidara's throat, and bared his teeth. Deidara's visible eye flickered upward, as his clay bird was being demolished by Lee, unable to do all that much without its master's commands. Lee landed with Gaara's body in his arms, as the clay birds remained splattered all around him. "Naruto, I have recovered Gaara's body," Lee said. Naruto nodded tersely. "Thank you." Lee was incredibly capable, and he had a bond of his own with Gaara, forged through fighting together against a common enemy. He knew he could count on him. Deidara gasped for air, straining out a laugh. "What does it matter? He's already dead. HMPH. You should have seen the others we captured. They were feared, hated because somebody else chose to seal a tailed beast in their bodies. Their existence was filled with loneliness and suffering. If you ask me, they're better off dead." Naruto grabbed Deidara's wrist and slammed his hand against the wall. "I'll beat all of you. As long as I'm alive, you'll never capture another tailed beast." He heaved out a hacking cough, spittle dribbling along his lips. "You're different from the rest, just like Gaara was. At least he had a couple of people who cared. In the end, though, it doesn't matter. HMPH. We'll capture all the tailed beasts, no matter how hard you try. Maybe you'll get lucky and have someone try to defend you before you die." Every cell in his body ached to kill Deidara where he stood, so that he couldn't harm anyone else. But if he captured him, they could learn so much about how the Akatsuki operated, and find new ways to defeat them. Deidara's hand twitched. A clay spider crawled out of the mouth embedded in his palm. Naruto saw the chakra within the spider expand and jumped back. The spider didn't explode, but Deidara was free. He charged at Lee and threw the spider at Naruto in the same movement. This time, the spider did explode, forcing Naruto to dodge. It granted Deidara enough time to catch up to Lee and reveal a hedgehog in his palm, using it as bait. "Now I'll show you," Deidara shouted, throwing the hedgehog at a rapidly approaching Naruto. The hedgehog curled into a ball and spun, but Naruto was able to sidestep the explosion. However, he wasn't able to help Lee, and when the smoke cleared, Deidara had managed to retrieve Gaara's prone body. Lee had been knocked to the cave floor, but he sprung up to his feet. Naruto saw his teammates fending off Sasori's onslaught of Senbon. He grit his teeth, and chased after Deidara before he could fly away. Samui reached his side just as he was about to leave. She wasn't injured, which was one thing he could be fortunate about. "I'm going after Deidara," Naruto said. "I'm coming with you," Samui said, and her tone held no room for argument. "Fine by me. You need more support," Kakashi said. "Getting you alone is exactly what Deidara wants." Samui frowned. "Naruto is more than capable of fighting Deidara on his own, and I will be there to support him." "Go ahead," Shio said. "Let us take care of my grandson." Naruto made eye contact with the wizened ninja, saw the determined resolve lining every wrinkle on her face. "Good luck." Kakashi's jaw tensed up. "Don't be reckless, you two. Remember, your lives are more important than the mission." Naruto smiled. "We'll be careful. We'll join up with you once Sasori is defeated," Guy said. "Until then, keep him in your sights." "Will do." With Samui at his side, Naruto left the cave to see Neji engaged in combat with Deidara. Deidara used Gaara's body as a shield, before leaping onto the cliff and running along it to reach the forest above, avoiding the volley of fire Neji unleashed from his palm. "Neji, we're going after Deidara, Naruto said. The others are fighting Sasori of the Red Sand. Neji frowned. Allow me to join you. I've seen how Sasori fights, and I believe my skills will be better suited against Deidara. Naruto turned to Samui. What do you think? Samui stared at Neji, pursed her lips. I don't mind. Then let's go, Naruto said. There's no time to waste. Naruto, Samui and Neji ran through the open field, following Deidara into a thick forest. They had taken a triangle formation with Neji taking point, since he'd be the first one to see Deidara, and they were fast enough to keep him within sight. Samui was on Naruto's right, and while her expression was one of calm focus, he could see the slight furrowing of her eyebrows. She hadn't forgotten what Neji did to her comrade, and Samui kept a mean grudge. Not only that, her anger was the type that festered like an infected wound. She could keep it contained, and act professionally, but he never liked seeing it. Be careful, Neji said. There's a trap waiting for us. Naruto reached out with his sensor and saw 20 dots of chakra clustered along the tree branches. They looked like spiders with huge hind legs. Weaving through hand seals, Naruto filled the forest with dozens of deadly wind scythes, cleaving through the spiders before they could explode. The three ninja teams split off, maneuvering around ruined branches and fallen trees. Neji flicked 2 shuriken to both of his sides, catching a pair of clay scorpions that Naruto hadn't caught with his wind jutsu. More traps of this nature waited for them, but instead of destroying the forest to destroy the explosives, they got in close, and when the clay animals jumped at them, Samui caught them in a net woven from lightning chakra, neutralizing them completely. Pretty cool, huh? Naruto said. Samui nodded. Very cool. Let's keep focused, Neji said, rather brusquely. It seemed like he hadn't completely let go of his grudge against the hidden cloud, even though he'd kept it to himself for the duration of their alliance. Eventually, the trio of ninja came across a wide clearing surrounded by massive trees. Deidara was standing on the opposite side of the clearing, Gaara's body sprawled out at his feet. You want him, Deidara said. Then you'd better come get him. Naruto scowled, slamming through a set of hand seals before charging at Deidara. Deidara grinned and the grass beneath Naruto shook before exploding. When the smoke cleared, Naruto wasn't anywhere to be seen, but of course, he was always one to take advantage of any opportunity. I know you're still around, Deidara said, and he was right, as Naruto had made himself disappear from Deidara's view and used a shadow clone to trigger the explosion. He hadn't moved an inch, but the real difficulty of retrieving Gaara's body had been made very clear. The clearing was layered with explosives and other traps that would doom them if they took the wrong step. In addition to that, Naruto had to concentrate to see minuscule amounts of chakra littered all around, colored like smoke. Deidara can rapidly increase the concentration of chakra in his clay from range, Neji said. That's how he triggered the last explosion. Naruto smirked. Good to know. Are there any areas that won't explode? Samui asked. Yeah, Naruto said. Just follow my lead. With a stern nod, Samui followed Naruto as they rushed towards Deidara, slipping around the areas with the largest congregation of detonating clay with enough speed to avoid Deidara's attempts at catching them off guard with explosions. In less than a minute, they had reached Deidara, and Naruto thrust out a Rasengan at his chest. Deidara smirked, and his body shone, bulging and bubbling as his skin turned milky white. Got you, Deidara shouted. Samui, Naruto shouted. Samui stabbed Deidara with her tanto, channeling lightning chakra into him and stopping the explosion before it could detonate. Deidara had baited them with an exploding clone. Gaara's body had been left behind, and Naruto saw a clay raccoon peeking out of Gaara's chest. Lightning crashed from above, annihilating the raccoon before it could explode. Blue sparks crackled across Gaara's body, and while it wouldn't bring him back to life, it wouldn't hurt him either. Bastard, Naruto shouted. Dirty tricks were part and parcel of a ninja's toolkit, but this was taking things way too far. Focus, Naruto, Samui said. We're almost there. Naruto immediately formed a clone to retrieve Gaara's body, searching for Deidara's real body. Neji had gone on the hunt, closing in on Deidara's hiding place in the trees. A clay bird blasted towards Neji, but he jabbed it with his left hand, leaving the inert bomb behind. He caught up with Deidara and slammed his gloved right hand into Deidara's chest. A black seal array erupted across Deidara's body before lighting up. Deidara lurched backwards. Then a log appeared in his place, an explosive tag taped onto its bark. Even in an inferior state, art is still an explosion. Deidara screamed, diving back to the clearing. Neji jabbed the explosive tag, protecting him from harm, before following Deidara onto safe ground. Give up, Neji said. We can neutralize your explosions, and it's only a matter of time before you run out of clay. You've lost, Deidara. Deidara grinned. I'll admit, using lightning chakra to stop my creations was a clever trick, but the best artists know how to adapt. It was time to finish this. Deidara forged a clay bird and hurled it at Naruto and Samui, but to him, the bird became a scorpion that mocked his ability to create true art. Release, Deidara said. He was scowling, a manic fury erupting in his eye. You think that genjutsu can contain my art? Don't make me laugh. Genjutsu is nothing more than a giant farce. It's just parlor tricks, manipulation. Naruto smirked. These parlor tricks are enough to beat you. HMPH. That's where you're wrong. Deidara released another clay bird. It raced towards Naruto again. Naruto threw a kunai that split it in half. Ha! Deidara formed the hand seal that let him detonate his clay, but nothing happened. What? His hand spat out a clay spider that scuttled towards them. Samui casually threw a shuriken at it. Explode. Deidara roared, but it didn't. Genjutsu will never contain my art. He reached into his pouch and threw out a shuriken made of clay. Take this. Explode. Naruto dodged the shuriken, and just like all of the others, Deidara failed to unleash his art on the ignorant masses. Deidara howled in enraged laughter. You monster. What did you do to my art? Naruto glared at the insane bomber. You killed Gaara, you bastard. Taking away your art is exactly what you deserve. Neji shook his head. He's been defeated, Naruto. Let's end it here. No, Naruto said, and his eyes flickered red. He has to suffer first. Samui stared at him until it became uncomfortable. Did you forget our mission? No, he didn't. He remembered where he was, what his mission was supposed to be. Then he looked at Deidara's continued descent into insanity that he had triggered. He'd implanted a tiny amount of his chakra inside Deidara just before his clone rushed at him, and used it to infect his mind like a parasite. As soon as Neji told him how Deidara had detonated his clay, Naruto knew how to win. When he cast the illusion that transfigured Deidara's bird, he had layered it behind another genjutsu that would activate the chakra he sent earlier. It was like a bomb had went off, and from that point onward, whenever Deidara channeled chakra to make his clay explode, the majority of the chakra would actually be redirected to his feet, forcing him to watch his art fail him over and over again. If he tried to increase the amount of chakra he implanted into the clay, just enough would enter to keep him placid. Not only that, the genjutsu would only activate whenever Deidara thought about his explosions. It was an insidious, dirty trick, but it had done its job. Deidara reached into his pouch. You want to take my art away from me? He pulled out a large wad of clay and began to chew. His chakra began to rise at a frighteningly fast rate, concentrating itself at a single point on his body. Think again. Naruto appeared in front of Deidara and slit his throat. Blood gurgled from the wound, and Deidara collapsed, all the chakra he gathered fading to nothing. He had wanted to capture Deidara so that they could learn more about the Akatsuki, but he was far too dangerous to leave unattended. As a result, one member of the Akatsuki was dead by his hand, and the rest were bound to follow. Naruto went over to his clone. Wordlessly, his clone handed over Gaara's body, and unshed tears formed around Naruto's eyes. He'd avenged Gaara's death, but it didn't matter in the end. His fellow Jinchuriki was dead. His friend was never coming back. And even if he killed Deidara 1,000 times, there was nothing he could do to bring Gaara back to life. Naruto intended to return to the cave where the rest of the team were fighting Sasori, but his teammates had arrived at the clearing 1 minute after Deidara had been defeated. Their appearance had cut through the stupor he'd fallen into. Where's Deidara? Kakashi asked. His Sharingan was hidden once more. Dead, Samui said. Naruto killed him. What happened to Deidara's body? We burned it, Neji said. Kakashi nodded, looking no worse than before. Good job, you three. What happened to Sasori? Naruto asked. He's dead, too, Kakashi said. How? Sakura was able to crush the body that you saw, Guy said, and like Kakashi, there was no sign of injury on him. He revealed that he'd made the third cage into a puppet, but I was able to defeat it with Lee's assistance. Things got a bit hairy when he revealed his true form, but with Lady Chiyo's help, we were able to come up with a plan that resulted in Sasori's defeat. Tenten winced. He had a lot of weapons, and even more puppets. We disposed of nearly everything he had so he couldn't come back. Naruto gave the other ninja who hadn't spoken a once-over. Sakura was breathing deeply, Lee was cut up in a few places, and Chiyo was winded, but overall, everyone else was okay. Alive. Considering that Sasori had been defeated without any major casualties, that was a victory he could cherish, even if he hadn't been able to kill Sasori himself. Excellent work, Neji said. Tenten dusted off her hands, a tired smile on her face. Wait until you see what I got, Neji. Neji chuckled. Ever the weapons collector, aren't you? Chiyo walked over to them. Her eyes were filled with sadness, focused solely on Gaara. Naruto turned away from her. Let's go back to the sand village, Naruto said, voice cracking like crumbling sand. We should put Gaara to rest. Nobody objected, not even Chiyo. Sakura was frowning, concern for him shining in her green eyes, but he didn't need it. He was fine. Moving through the water and the fields and the forests, running back to the hidden sand village, all of that was easy to do because he was still alive to do it. All he could think about was about the person he was carrying in his arms. Gaara had saved him from his inner torment. He truly understood everything he'd experienced and showed him he could recover, become a better person. It was thanks to Gaara that he could really accept Jiraiya's guidance and act on Temari's advice. Gaara was someone truly precious to him, one of the only people in the world that he trusted unconditionally, and losing him was a bitter pain. The worst thing about Gaara's death was how callous it was. The Akatsuki only killed him because of the tailed beast inside of him. Gaara had become Kazekage, just like he told him he would, but that didn't change anything. They didn't care that Gaara went through unimaginable hardship and pain, they didn't care that he managed to overcome his demons. He had family who loved him and a village to protect, but it didn't matter to them if they stole Gaara's future and robbed his precious people of all the time they could have spent with him. The Akatsuki didn't care about any of that, and they'd do the same thing to him. It was a sobering reality, but he'd carry that weight until the Akatsuki lay battered and broken at his feet. Even though hours had passed, he'd barely noticed until the forest ended and the desert began, sand sloughing beneath his sandals. We're here, Chiyo said, and when Naruto looked ahead, he saw the walls protecting the hidden sand. It was pretty late, but the sun still shone since autumn was in full swing. Let me see him, Naruto Uzumaki, Chiyo said. Naruto scowled, bitter tears of resentment and anguish threatening to fall. You don't get to look at him. You don't get to touch him. You're the reason why the Akatsuki killed him. I know, Chiyo said, and Naruto looked at her, shocked from her blunt admission. It was his father who told me to do it, but I was the one who chose to seal Shukaku inside of him. I was blinded by the prospect of strengthening our village, so much so that I failed to consider the life Gaara would live. Nor did I care. Naruto's scowl hardened. You didn't. You never asked him how he was doing. You never knew how much was hurting. Gaara didn't deserve any of this. No, he didn't, Chiyo said. The least I can do is give him another chance. What? The regret on her face cut through his anger. I have made so many mistakes in my life, and children like Gaara have suffered for them. The world is filled with such well-intentioned fools, but knowing that people like you and Gaara are here gives me hope that the future can change for the better. Chiyo walked around him, so she was standing right in front of him and Gaara. I will revive him. Let me right the wrong I have made. Naruto swallowed deeply, and fell to his knees, gently setting Gaara's body down on the sand. Chiyo descended to the desert floor with him. Then she placed her hands on Gaara's stomach, and vibrant blue chakra erupted to life around them. She wasn't just transferring chakra to Gaara, she was pouring her very life into his body. However, her chakra was rapidly depleting, so Naruto thrust his hands over hers. Use my chakra, Lady Chiyo. Chiyo smiled. Thank you. She grabbed his hands and the blue glow hovering above Gaara became so intense that its light was blinding. His chakra ebbed away, but it was going to a good place. "Do me a favor," Chiyo whispered. "Protect Gaara like you would protect your own life, and become Hokage like no one else has ever been. I truly believe you have the power to change this world for the better." Naruto nodded. "You got it." Slowly, but surely, the light began to dim until the glow faded entirely. Chiyo was still holding onto his hands, her wrinkled face deathly pale. But Gaara's body twitched, and his eyes opened. Chakra was emerging from deep within his body. "Naruto," Gaara said. A smile beamed across Naruto's face. "Welcome back, buddy." Chiyo's jutsu worked. Gaara had come back. Gaara was alive. There was one more thing left to do. The nine-tailed fox's chakra bubbled around him, forming a cloak with one tail. It was toxic chakra, drenched in the nine tails' undying hatred, but it was more potent than anything he'd ever seen. So Naruto let go of Chiyo's hands and focused, purifying the chakra with the shortcut Jiraiya had taught him. It wasn't practical to use in battle, but for this, it would be enough. When he finished, the single tail was orange, flickering and flowing like a flame of life. He wrapped it around Chiyo's waist, letting the chakra enter her body, and when he stood, she stood with him. She was on the brink of death, but this tail would keep her tethered to life. "What are you doing, child?" Chiyo asked. Naruto smiled. "You should get to see your village one more time." Chiyo froze, before cackling wildly. "Very well." She looked down. "Gaara should lead us there." Gaara blinked owlishly, before grabbing his knee. "It would be my honor." Unfortunately, he couldn't stand on his own power, but Sakura stepped forward to rejuvenate his bones and muscles that had suffered from rigor mortis, and Lee came forward to help Gaara stand. He draped Gaara's arm over his left shoulder, and Naruto's left shoulder supported Gaara's other arm. Together, Gaara was able to lead Chiyo and the rest of the team that had fought to save him, crossing through the desert to return to the Hidden Sand village. On the way there, ninja from the Hidden Sand came to surround them, cheering for Gaara's return, weeping tears of joy that their cage was still alive. Kankuro and Temari were at the forefront, grinning at their brother from relief and happiness and a myriad of other emotions, and Naruto and Lee let them carry him back to his home. When he saw how loved Gaara was, Naruto grinned. Gaara truly was worthy of their affection and their empathy. He always had been. Eventually, they reached the walls that welcomed all visitors to the village hidden in the sand, and Chiyo looked at it with wide, unblinking eyes, soaking everything in. She made eye contact with Naruto, smiling widely, and nodded once. It was time. Naruto let go of the elder who had given her life so that Gaara could live in her stead, and Chiyo slumped to the sand like a puppet whose strings had been cut. It was the end for her, but for Gaara, it was a second chance. A new beginning. Chapter 36. Immortal. Chiyo's funeral had been a quiet affair. A moment of silence was in her honor as soon as her death was confirmed, and her body had been laid to rest without any delay. Her grave had been marked with a headstone by her brother Ebizo, something that she had opposed in life. Many of the villagers gathered to pay their respects to the esteemed elder. All that was left was for Gaara to give a short speech. Lady Chiyo showed profound courage in choosing to aid our comrades from the Leaf. Her expertise was a key factor in bringing Sasori of the Red Sand, our village's greatest criminal, to justice. She is also the reason why I am standing before you today. A ninja's legacy is said to be defined by the nature of their death, whether it happens in ignominy or in honor, at peace or in war. Lady Chiyo was a pillar of our village, and her contributions shall help our village grow for generations to come. She was also someone who made many mistakes, mistakes that were greater than you might imagine. In her final moments, Lady Chiyo showed the strength of character to make amends for her past misdeeds. She gave her life so that the next generation of the Hidden Sand could live to succeed where she could not. I urge you to take heed from her example. It does not matter who you are or what you have done, for as long as you draw breath, you have the chance to right your wrongs and change yourself for the better. It is in our nature to stumble and to fail, but it is also within our capacity to surpass ourselves and lend a helping hand to those who are struggling. That is how the Hidden Sand and everyone who calls this village home shall truly prosper. After he finished, Gaara closed his eyes and gave a silent prayer on Chiyo's behalf. Since he became Kazekage, Gaara had presided over his fair share of funerals. It was never pleasant, but it was his duty, and he had known many of the deceased personally, which allowed him to honor their departure in a manner they deserved. He had not known Chiyo very well before her passing, but he had known of her role in sealing Shukaku within him. She was following his father's orders, and as such, he hated her on principle. The main reason why she avoided his wrath was because there were always other targets in front of him, waiting to be slaughtered. They only met after he had let go of his hatred. She had regretted his sealing, and he had accepted her apology for what it was. What good was expressing remorse when the deed had already been done? What good was harboring resentment for something that could not be changed? Positive action could be manifested from remorse. Acceptance could be found when resentment was re-examined through reflection. There was no point in clinging on to hatred. Although, he knew from experience that learning to let go was far from the easiest of tasks. Gaara opened his eyes and saw the awe and adoration of the villagers. There was no hint of fear that he could detect. People had cried tears of joy because he had returned to them. It was still hard to grasp that he was respected, but he cherished it. It was harder to believe that he was alive. He had failed to defeat Deidara, yet he had succeeded in defending the village from his explosives. Knowing his people would continue to live helped him make peace with his imminent death. And yet, here he stood, because Chiyo had sacrificed her life to bring him back from the dead. It would take time for it to sink in, and after the crowd had departed, Gaara dwelled at Chiyo's grave, reflecting on how so much had changed. What would his father say if he could see him now? How would his uncle Yashimaru react? Their treatment and betrayal was a wound that had long since closed, but every now and then, a remnant of the pain they inflicted would make itself known. He took heart in knowing that he would not repeat the mistakes of his predecessors, confident that he had found a better path as a leader and as a man. Gaara heard the rustling of the wind, then the shuffling of light footsteps. "There you are," Naruto said, and when Gaara faced his friend, he saw him smiling. When Naruto had left the hidden sand, he was battling trauma and despair, bottling up his pain and isolating himself. Gaara had empathized, for he had gone through a very similar ordeal. It was only fair that he helped Naruto heal as Naruto had helped him. Now, his posture was relaxed, hands at his sides and shoulders loose. They were still the same height, and his blue eyes were shining with barely any hint of anguish or anger. "I am glad to see you in good spirits," Gaara said. The sun was pretty low in the sky. To deeply ponder on his life and his emotions was most certainly a time-consuming task. "How are you?" Naruto asked. Gaara let the question settle in his mind. It wasn't a conversation starter, and Naruto's voice had quavered slightly, so saying that he was doing well wouldn't be a satisfactory answer. Tired. He had been healed, but fatigue was an anchor weighing on his limbs, and for the first time in his existence, sleep seemed like an appealing prospect. Grateful. Most of all, I am happy to be here, among the living. Me too. I'm glad you're with us, Gaara. How are you doing? Naruto smiled. Amazing. I got my head sorted out, I learned a bunch of new jutsu, I made some good friends. I even got the 9 tails to help me out. His friend's smile dimmed. Oh, right. Gaara frowned. It is an unfortunate loss. He wouldn't have said that if Yugito-ni had never introduced the idea that tailed beasts were more than just monsters. During the handful of times they had met over the years, she advised him on how to communicate with Shukaku and forged a bond that went beyond their shared burdens. Admittedly, Gaara had been concerned. Shukaku had made his life miserable, preventing him from falling asleep and doing everything it could to erode his seal. The Sand were adept at sealing, but Shukaku was adept at adapting. After all, it had managed to escape from a tea kettle imbued with the most potent seals their village could conjure. Occasionally, the tailed beast would talk, which was how he learned that Shukaku was not a spirit that had taken the form of an old priest. The myth had formed because Shukaku's first Jinchuriki had owned a tea kettle and was kept under a strict guard, locked away from the outside world. The Jinchuriki, Bunpuku, had shown kindness to Shukaku, but that had been the exception to the rule, and Shukaku was not willing to be friends with anyone who would eventually die. Still, Gaara persisted, and he was close to befriending Shukaku before the Akatsuki attacked. The clarity of mind their separation brought was not worth the pain that Shukaku must have been experiencing. Gaara held up a hand, particles of sand floating around his fingertips. He will not be forgotten. Yeah, He won't. It was a surprise to find that he could still control sand. He had assumed that it was a gift from Shukaku being sealed within him just before his birth. Perhaps Yoshimaru's theory that the sand contained his mother's will and her love wasn't a fanciful lie. As he knew how to control the sand with his own chakra, such pondering was ultimately wasteful thinking. I beat Deidara, Naruto said, clenching a fist. His eyes, his whole face was brimming with unrestrained anguish. I killed him, Gaara. He kidnapped you. He sat on your corpse, and he told me that nobody would come to rescue you. He was wrong. Gaara felt something warm emerge in his chest. Thank you, my friend. Naruto smiled through his sadness, before glancing at Chiyo's gravestone, contemplative. Why did you help Chiyo? Gaara asked. Naruto kept his gaze locked on the gravestone, but loosened his fist. She saved you. She was willing to make things right. She deserved to see the village she fought for one last time. It was quite the honorable gesture. Surprising, as well, but he knew better than to underestimate Naruto Uzumaki. Why do you think people do such bad things for their village? Naruto asked, frowning. I get it when it comes to the enemy, but when it comes to hurting your own people, your friends and family, it doesn't make any sense. Gaara frowned as well. This was an answer he still hadn't found. It might be because they want their village to prosper, and they see no better alternative to stopping the violence and suffering this world inflicts on us. I have sent my fellow ninja to their deaths. They understand that I would do the same in their place, and they are willing to die for our village, but it is always disheartening to see my comrades' lives cut short. If it meant preventing their deaths, I would do whatever it takes to protect them. Would you betray your people? Never, Gaara said. He was grateful that he had never been forced to make the decisions his father had made. It would be something he'd immediately refuse, and the cost in doing so might be too great to endure. Death was not the worst fate one could face. Our way of life is a harsh one, too harsh. My dream is for the hidden sand to be a village where nobody is treated as a tool to be discarded or a weapon without a heart. The day may come when we do not have to kill one another to achieve success, and no one will ever know the suffering we faced. Naruto's eyes glazed over, like a smooth piece of glass. Do you think you'll ever achieve that kind of peace? Gaara sighed. I don't know, but it is a dream worth fighting for. When Naruto faced him, his smile was bittersweet. You're really something, Gaara. Lady Chiyo said that I had the power to change the world for the better, and I wasn't sure how to do that. After listening to you talk, maybe there is a way. He frowned, and the change in his demeanor was so sudden that it nearly gave Gaara pause. The only visible emotion on his face was determined focus. But if we want peace, we have to defeat the Akatsuki first. We need to. And after? Gaara asked. What shall you do? Enjoy my life. Perhaps you can become Hokage. Naruto shook his head. Things are different in the Leaf. Gaara stared at Naruto, almost stunned into silence by the implication. There's no reason why you can't become Hokage. You have proven many wrong, and you are more than capable of winning over the rest. Naruto didn't seem convinced. It might have been related to his past trauma, but if someone was foolish enough to betray Naruto, then that was their loss. Whatever you choose to do, you will have my support, Gaara said. You have saved my life twice now, so it is only fair that I return the favor. A genuine smile blossomed across Naruto's face. Thanks, Gaara, but you've already saved me. Gaara's eyes widened. He'd helped Naruto, but to think that his words had that much an impact. Incredible. Naruto turned around, and Gaara heard someone approaching them. He recognized the girl. It was Matsuri, a genin with short brown hair. He had personally trained her while she was in the academy. Lord Gaara, she said. Lady Temari asked me to come find you. Lady, Naruto asked. Temari is one of my most trusted advisors, Gaara said. And you are aware of her skill. Naruto smiled, but it was restrained. Was it because of Matsuri's presence? I know. Well, I won't keep you. It was nice talking to you, Gaara. The wind burst around Naruto, and he was gone, leaving Gaara alone with Matsuri. Is Temari still at my office? Gaara asked. Matsuri shook her head. She said she had something she wanted to take care of. Her cheeks flushed when they made eye contact. That was the guy who saved you, wasn't he? Gaara smiled. Yes, he is a good friend. As much as he would have enjoyed talking to Naruto until dawn, there was work to be done. Routine had a peculiar habit of asserting itself in times of dramatic upheaval, and time waited for no one, not even the resurrected. Naruto was so proud of what Gaara had accomplished. The villagers loved him and respected him, and it made him believe that becoming Hokage could actually be more than just a childhood dream. Of course, he'd need a reason to become Hokage, and try as he might, he couldn't really think of one. He'd earned a strong reputation as the Blade of Illusion. He had real bonds with Jiraiya and Gaara, and he was good friends with Temari. Kakashi had proven himself to be trustworthy, and Naruto was on decent terms with a good number of ninja from the Leaf. All he'd wanted from becoming Hokage was acknowledgement and respect, and he already had both. Being Hokage meant taking on the gargantuan responsibilities that came with the position, and that wasn't remotely enticing. He wasn't Gaara, a man with a dream and the conviction he needed to achieve it. Destroying the Akatsuki was his goal, and as long as they were still around, there wasn't much point in dreaming about the future. Since he'd already eaten dinner, it was high time that Naruto returned to his hotel room. The sun was about to set, and it had been a really long day. Just as he was about to head there, he felt a familiar chakra signature approaching him. "Naruto," Temari said, after she came around the street corner. His eyes turned upward, meeting his. "You've gotten tall." Naruto smiled. The top of Temari's head was level with his nose. "It feels great." "I bet it does. No more short jokes, eh?" "Nope." She came up to him and wrapped her arms around his neck, enveloping him in a warm hug. He immediately returned it. "It's good to see you, Naruto," she said, whispering in his ear. "You, too," he said. She released him first, and when he let go, he saw her smile. "You're not busy, are you?" Temari asked. "Not really." "Excellent," she said. "There's a place I want to show you. Come with me." He smiled. "What are we waiting for?" If it wasn't for the fact that it was pretty late, he might have assumed that they were going out for another long day of training. Instead, they were on an excursion, walking through a village that was so familiar to him. He hadn't been in the hidden sand for more than a year and Gaara had just come back from the dead, but the villagers he saw were still burning the daylight oil like they always did. Shopkeepers were in the midst of business, ninja ran on rooftops and villagers enjoyed an early supper. Routine had a way of keeping people tethered to reality, and routine had helped him realign himself when he was wallowing in the mire created by his thoughts. If Gaara had shown him that he could truly move on, Temari had made him realize that he didn't have to punish himself because of someone else's wrongdoing. "We're here," Temari said. "What do you think?" They were standing on a cliff overlooking the hidden sand. The sun was setting, bringing a comforting warmth in its rays that reflected off mirrors and scattered everywhere in dazzling orange and red light. "It's a really nice view," Naruto said. "I'd always go on top of the Hokage monument whenever I was feeling down. It helped me forget about whatever was bothering me." Temari smiled. "That's exactly why I like coming here. Seeing the village like this reminds me of what I have, and what I've fought for. It gives me the courage to keep on fighting." "Is it because of the village itself?" "Not exactly. I love living here, but the hidden sand is what it is because of the people inside it, and the culture and ideals we've made for ourselves. Everything we have, we've earned through hard work and grit. It's made us strong and resilient, but it's made us harsh, too." A frown crossed Temari's face. "I used to love lording my superiority over people I thought were weaker than me, because I fought for my strength and they had the gall to be complacent. I never thought I was wrong to do that until someone else did it to me." They made eye contact, and Temari's teal eyes were laced with remorse. "Did you ever get a chance to talk to Tenten?" Naruto asked. "Not long after you left us. I apologized for how I humiliated her, and she accepted it." Naruto smiled. "That's awesome." Her expression turned pensive. "It's one thing to condemn someone for being weak, but it's another thing to help them find their strength. That's what I try to live by these days." It made him wonder why she never helped Gaara before until he remembered that her little brother had been her greatest fear. He couldn't blame her. Gaara was a monster back then, and she didn't have much chance of helping him understand. Witnessing someone's pain wasn't the same as experiencing it. "Lots more people should do that," Naruto said. "That's why Gaara's mission is so important. He's living proof that you can be better than you were the day before, that even if things seem bleak, you can turn your whole life around. It takes courage to make that choice, and it's up to us to help people realize that. Naruto's smile grew. Exactly. It was almost exactly what Gaara had told him, and if Temari was working as an ambassador and as one of Gaara's advisors, she was expressing Gaara's ideals on a larger scale than he imagined. How long has it been since you left the leaf? Temari asked. Naruto gazed at the hidden sand, mouth pressed in a thin line. Almost 3 years. Why do you ask? Shikamaru was asking about you, she said. I told him you visited us, and he wanted to know how you were doing. He tensed up. What did you tell him? I said you were doing well for yourself. Getting stronger. It wasn't my place to tell him everything that happened to you. Naruto sighed in relief. Thanks. His mind became plagued with anxious thoughts, leaving a silence that wasn't comfortable. How are things going with Shikamaru? Better than I imagined. I've been trying to get him to take a promotion to Jonin, but he's perfectly content staying at Shunin. He's gotten a lot stronger and he knows how to lead, but apparently, all the extra work would be too much a drag. A broad smile tugged at Naruto's lips. That sounds like him. He stared at her once more. I can't thank you enough for your help. Temari smiled, tenderly. Seeing you like this is thanks enough. What do you mean? You're a lot happier than you were before. More sure of yourself. He shrugged. I had a lot of help. The sun's last rays flashed in his eyes, and he held his arm over his head to block out its blinding light. But Temari was basking in the light, almost glowing from its radiance. It's funny, Temari said. I always wanted my brothers to know that they could rely on me for advice. I can do that now because you respected me enough to listen to what I had to say. Naruto smiled, feeling fulfilled, well and truly. He took another look at the sky. It was dark purple, now that the sun had set. It's getting late, isn't it? It is, but before I let you go. She kissed him on the cheek. That's for saving Gaara. Thank you for everything you've done for us, Naruto. His cheeks turned red, and he rubbed the back of his neck. Just doing my job. Naruto returned in his hotel room, sitting on its only bed. It just so happened that this was the same room he'd lived in during his last visit to the hidden sand, and it had been prepared just for him. He shouldn't have been surprised, but he was touched by the gesture. Without having to find a place to stay, he could make the most of his time in the sand. Considering how they first met and how ruthless she had been, it was a surprise that he was such good friends with Temari. But when she brought up Shikamaru, it had triggered some strange feelings in him. Of course he didn't want his friend to worry about how he was doing, but a small part of him wasn't sure if Shikamaru could be trusted. When he thought about it, it didn't seem right that Sarutobi would let a genin do such a secretive mission, no matter how smart Shikamaru was. Even if he had been, the meeting that made them friends wouldn't have happened if Naruto never stumbled onto Team 10's training ground, and when he thought about all of their interactions, Shikamaru hadn't ever lied to him, even if he could have done it to spare his feelings. Shikamaru had been a loyal and steadfast friend, someone he could truly trust. The same could be said for Chuki and Ayame, since they weren't ninja, and he had a good feeling that he could trust Iruka, too. He'd never forget how Iruka had fought for him against Mizuki, how he explained why he had grown to like him. There was no reason for Iruka to be given a loyalty mission, and even if he had, he'd only interacted with Iruka a handful of times since becoming a genin, and he was the one who reached out. Paranoia was poisonous, and unlike caution, there was never any good reason to feel it, since all it brought was doubt that distracted him and decayed his relationships. He heard someone knocking on his door, derailing his train of thought entirely. It's open, Samui. His partner came in, carrying her equipment. This is your room, correct? Naruto nodded. Were you given a room? Yes. Samui closed the door behind her. I'll be staying here. He didn't even blink at the statement. He didn't mind it, either. That didn't mean others wouldn't. Are you sure that's? A kunai slammed into the wall. It was buried up to the handle, mere inches above his head. He looked at Samui, staring at his fellow blonde's blue eyes, then he smiled, and she nodded. I'll be taking a shower, she said, and walked over to the adjoining bathroom before he could object. Don't waste the water, Naruto shouted after her. He eyed the kunai once more. As soon as he heard the flowing of water, he pulled it out. Hopefully, the hotel staff didn't complain. The fact that he was more worried about property damage than Samui attacking him would have been unfathomable to an outsider, but to him, it was a clear sign that Samui trusted him. Samui could have stayed at her designated hotel room. It would have been well stocked and well furnished, more than enough for anyone to get a good night of rest. She chose to stay with him instead. There was no risk of her being attacked by anyone inside the village, but she was aligned with him and no one else. That was why she had effectively handed him a weapon to kill her with while she was completely vulnerable in the shower, because she knew he'd use it to protect her. They were comrades, so he knew that what she just did was her way of expressing that trust. He thought that knowing how a woman was supposed to feel without them saying a word was ridiculous, but he could quickly decipher every little movement Samui made. He was in tune with every nuance of her expression and every shift of her mood. How he'd gotten so familiar with her, he wasn't completely sure, but it was pretty nice. Samui walked back into his room, towel wrapped around her body. He let out a deep exhale, watching her approach his bed and sit on its edge. She didn't turn, granting him a glimpse of her shoulders and the nape of her neck. Her skin was smooth, almost completely pristine. There wasn't a shower, Samui said. Naruto chuckled, before laying down on the bed. It'd waste too much water. You saw the sponges, didn't you? I did. You're speaking from experience. I spent a few weeks here for some training. Naruto hooked his finger inside the kunai's circular tip and spun it a few times. It really helped me. Did you get used to the lack of water? Yep. How? Naruto stared at the ceiling. There were more important things to worry about. Like the Akatsuki. Yeah, he said, flippantly. How did you find out where I was staying? Samui looked over her shoulder, down at him. One of the sand ninja showed me. She said she was a friend of yours. Naruto smiled. Temari, right, yes. I remember seeing you fight her one time, and now you're friends. His smile widened. You'd be surprised at how often that's happened. Not when you're involved, she said. The corner of her lip tugged up. How did it happen? She helped train me when I was here. It's why I'm so good at wind-style jutsu. Do you train with every girl you meet? Only the ones I grow close to, Naruto said, and when he thought about it, it turned out to be pretty accurate, even if he hadn't set out to do it. Samui blinked. Do you feel like you're close to me? Well, we are pretty close right now. Her mouth twitched. One day, he'd see her laugh openly, but unfortunately, that day was not today. Are you close to the cage? Naruto thought about responding, but he held back. It wasn't a secret that he was friends with Gaara, but the exact nature of their bond was valuable information. As long as they were partners, he trusted her with her life, but her true loyalties lay with her Raikage, and he'd be a fool if he forgot that. That was why he didn't share everything with her. He knew she did the same thing. We're friends, Naruto eventually said. Is that why you were so angry earlier? Naruto's smile slipped. You know why. It was like she wanted him to tell her everything she already knew or suspected. I know, she said. And I don't blame you. He sighed, somewhat relieved that she didn't press him. Then he sat up, and looked her in the eye. Thanks for backing me up back there, Naruto said. I said I'd protect you, Samui said. Blue eyes were locked on blue, and their faces were awfully close. Samui turned away first, standing up. I'm going to change. Naruto shook his head, trying to ignore the sudden flare of warmth that emerged under his cheeks. Should we get an extra bed? Samui didn't answer. She went to the bathroom and came out almost as quickly, clad in her nightwear of a loose red shirt and orange pants. It was fairly modest, but she'd been his roommate since their second mission together, so maybe that was why. In any case, she set her scrolls on the bedside drawer and climbed into bed next to him. You're gonna be comfortable like this? Naruto asked, voice slightly strained. She glanced at him with one cold eye. The bed is big enough for both of us. It wasn't as if they hadn't been in the same bed together, but there was a difference between a massage and sharing the same sleeping space. On the other hand, this was the only bed in the room, and he didn't feel like sleeping on the floor. Let me get changed. Naruto ran into the bathroom and pulled out his beige pajamas from one of his scrolls. He could have made some excuse and waited for Samui to fall asleep first, but he'd already washed himself. Being clean was something he always enjoyed, and the desert sand stuck around relentlessly. When he returned to his room, he saw that Samui had already pulled the thin blanket over her body. Her body was still, but her eyes were open. He stood there, considering everything laying in front of him, what it meant. The floor couldn't have been so bad. Are you sure you don't want to sleep in another bed? Naruto asked. I'd prefer sleeping next to you, Samui said. Unless you have a problem with that. He could have said yes and stopped her right there, but if she really wanted to do this, then why did have to get worked up over it? This didn't have to mean a thing. I don't. Then get in. Naruto crawled inside, turning his back to his partner. Sharing a bed with another woman wouldn't be some lucid dream. Good night, Naruto. Good night, Samui. Besides, he had his own pillow, some breathing room and enough blanket to curl into. It was all he needed to have a good night of sleep. Naruto had woken up with the dawn, just like old times. His mind was clear and his body was free from fatigue. Samui was still sleeping, a content look on her face. Seeing it was always a treat. Because their mission was complete, there was nothing keeping them in the hidden sand. As much as he'd like to stay, the next mission could come from anywhere. He always had to be alert, ready to move at a moment's notice. So when Samui woke up and got dressed, they prepared to leave. Fortunately, he had already handed Kakashi a complete mission report the day before. He'd gotten good at writing those down very quickly. They were planning to leave without making a fuss, but when Naruto and Samui reached the village's entrance, they saw a large number of the Sand's villagers, all ready to see them off. Some of them knew him thanks to his previous stay, but he'd gotten a lot more famous ever since he killed Deidara and he carried Gaara and Chio back to their home. He hadn't been the only one who'd been shown gratitude, but his actions had been the most visible, so while he appreciated the compliments, he was sure to give everyone their fair due. It was good to see Kakashi and Sakura and Team Guy, but they had to leave. Saying their goodbyes had been easy, because it was only farewell. Even if their life was fraught with danger, he didn't plan on dying anytime soon. Time went on, like it always did, and Naruto and Samui spent the next few days traveling north. No missions had been assigned to them, and when Naruto wasn't training, traveling or sleeping, he had free time. If the biggest consolation from having so much free time outside of missions was getting some much-needed time to rest, an unexpected boon that came with it was getting really good at meditation. He was almost as still as a statue, and when he got into the zone, his thoughts became distant, abstract things that barely affected him. Being on the move so often did get annoying sometimes, especially when the mission grind was overbearing. Sleeping in hotels or in makeshift camps was something he quickly grew used to, but it didn't compare to living in a proper home, and getting a mission just after another one ended kind of sucked. It made him appreciate having a place to call home even more, now that he'd been away from it for so long. The Hidden Leaf was still his home, and knowing that he could always return to his little apartment had been a comfort he never thought he'd lose. One thing that brought him solace was having good company alongside him. Jiraiya had lived away from the village for a long time, so he knew how to cope and helped him cope. Samui didn't let anything stop her if she could help it, and her attitude rubbed off on him. He hadn't really thought about how much the leaf had or hadn't changed, considering that the memories of the village lingered so closely to the memories of his betrayal. But time had dimmed the fresh pain those memories had wrought, and he could safely say that he wanted to go back. At the moment, he was meditating in a hotel room close to the Land of Grass's border, while Samui was busy taking a shower. Energy vibrated all over him, from the electricity that ran through the walls to the energy that lingered in the air. That energy wasn't exactly chakra, but he couldn't touch it even if he could see it with his sensor. A cat appeared out of thin air, landing on his bed. Naruto didn't jump from surprise. He merely opened his eyes and examined his new guest. The cat had dark brown fur, ears with sharp black tips and wide golden eyes. Master Yugito is danger, the cat said. The Akatsuki have found her. She's currently hiding in a small town on the Land of Rain's border. Naruto flinched. It was about a day away from their current location. Did she fight them? Yes, the cat said. Master Yugito is having trouble eliminating the Akatsuki rogues, and she has been unable to stage a retreat. She's already sent word to the Raikage, but reinforcements will take too long to arrive, and she's been fighting for a long time. The bathroom door slammed open, and watery footsteps squished against the carpet. "Tell Yugito that we're coming for her," Samui said. The cat nodded. "I will. Thank you." It jumped off the bed and disappeared, leaving Naruto and Samui alone in the bedroom. Naruto would be ready as soon as he strapped on his gear. He couldn't say the same for Samui, since she'd rushed out of the bathroom dripping wet and completely naked. He gulped and immediately focused on her face, watching it twist from a rictus of worry and fear to her regular stoic mask. "I'm gonna head out," Naruto said. His mouth was suddenly dry. "I can get there faster." "You'll be using it, right?" Naruto nodded stiffly, trying his hardest not to let his eyes feast on the rest of her body and engrave its tantalizing flesh into his mind. "I don't have a choice." He jumped off the bed and put on his flak jacket and backpack, placing his tanto on his waist. Once he was geared up, he double-checked everything to ensure that he wasn't missing anything he didn't immediately need. "Naruto," Samui said. The way she said his name sounded commanding, seductive. "Turn around." He turned around. Samui's eyes locked onto his, brimming with concern and another emotion he couldn't quite place. He ripped the sheet from the bed, but she grabbed his wrist before he could wrap it around her. She never liked being leered at, yet here she was, bearing herself to him. Was this another sign of her trust in him? Did she want him to lust over her body? "Yugito is the priority," Samui said. "Not killing the Akatsuki." "I know." "Cool." Samui embraced him, looping her arms around his. Her breasts pressed against his chest, sending a thrill down his spine. Her heartbeat was pounding faster than his. The sheet fell back to the bed. Naruto wrapped his arms around her waist, holding his partner and reveling in her warmth, enjoying the smoothness of her supple skin against his calloused hands. This wasn't the first time he'd touched her body, but there was an intimacy between them that he'd never felt before. What would her lips feel like? How would they taste? He pulled away, zipping up his flak jacket. His partner's gaze was smoldering. "Stay safe," she said. "I'll be right behind you." Naruto smiled. "I'll be waiting." He turned around, knowing that Samui was on his side, and in the blink of an eye, Naruto had left the building. Times like these, when he needed every drop of power he could muster, were the best time to ask his tenant for some rent. He'd need every advantage he could find to reach Yugito on time. 3 tails erupted from Naruto's tailbone as the 9-tailed fox's chakra enveloped his body in the form of an orange-red shroud. This was the maximum amount of chakra he could handle without losing himself in the 9-tail's hatred, and while the 9-tails had made it easier for him to tolerate the strain its chakra had on his body, the strain was still severe. So he ran like the wind, bounding across fields of grass that shifted into stone paths and smooth pavement as countryside made way for urban landscapes. The 9-tails chakra burned through his body, bubbling from an endless wellspring. It was doing its job. In less than 6 hours, he was already halfway to his destination. The land of rain's border came within sight, and he heard a massive explosion in the distance, beyond the range of his sensor. He rushed in the direction of the blast, willing his body to move, overcome the agony. He'd never used the 9-tails chakra for this long. But this pain couldn't possibly compare to the stress that Yugito must have been enduring, so he pushed onward. He saw a mountain cleaved in half, with rubble of what was once a large building strewn beneath it. His sensor caught 3 distinct chakra signatures. The first 2 were the most bizarre chakra signatures he'd ever seen. One was saturated in chakra that seethed in manic bloodlust, and the other had 5 separate chakra natures stitched together with copious amounts of chakra threads. Naruto scowled, immediately recognizing the 3rd chakra signature. Yugito's chakra was fading fast. There was no way he could charge in against the Akatsuki right now. He sent out a quartet of shadow clones to scope out the area, and when one dispelled, he saw Yugito staggering from phantom blows as a silver-haired man thrust a black spear into his body. His skin was pitch black, illuminated with white bones, and every time he stabbed himself, he screamed in ecstasy. Somehow, Yugito was taking all the damage. The monster had already stabbed his leg and his stomach. He had to move now. Naruto formed another clone, and this one had blood-red eyes and a feral grin. "Time to make our move," Naruto said. The 9 tails laughed. 3 tails twisted behind its back. If you insist, it said, in its true voice. They split apart to attack the Akatsuki from as many angles as possible. The clones he sent earlier seemed to be in on the plan, as they converged at the fight. Naruto flew through hand seals, using the Nine Tails chakra to amplify the range of his illusions and ensnare both of his targets at the same time. Hidan, the massive man in the Akatsuki's cloak, said. A black mask covered his mouth. Hurry it up, we've got company. The silver-haired man named Hidan howled. Get bent, Kakuzu. Interrupt me again and you're next. One of his clones had reached them first and jumped high in the air, blasting a massive vortex of wind. Hidan spread his arms out wide, and deep gouges appeared on Yugito's skin. Kakuzu launched his arm and black tendrils extended it far beyond any regular arm could possibly go, spearing through Naruto's clone just as it landed. The memory really hurt, but the sudden attack was all the distraction Naruto needed to catch Kakuzu in his illusion. He stumbled backward, holding a hand to his head, like he was falling over himself. Then he stomped the floor and stood up straight. Fool, Kakuzu shouted, killing the clone coming in his blind spot. Forked lightning electrocuted another clone before it could slam a Rasengan into Kakuzu's back. Naruto gritted his teeth. Kakuzu had broke through his turbulent genjutsu in seconds, and it hadn't taken hold on Hidan at all. In fact, Yugito's cheeks bulged out and blood exploded from her mouth. Oh, no. That was when Naruto noticed it. A strand of chakra was connecting Hidan to Yugito, anchored to a bloody circle Hidan was standing on. It wasn't just physical attacks that Hidan could transfer to his target. Any sort of damage he took would be inflicted on Yugito instead, even if its effects were induced by genjutsu. Naruto had reached Hidan and Kakuzu just as his last clone appeared next to Yugito, picking her up and running as far away as it could. Take her as far as you want. Hidan screamed, pointing the spear at his heart. She's already done for. Nothing escapes Lord Jashin's wrath. Kakuzu was weaving through hand seals, but the clone the Nine Tails was inhabiting lashed out with a giant chakra arm, pushing him straight through the crumbling wall. Hidan hesitated for a second, and it was all the time Naruto needed to shove him away from the circle of blood with a chakra arm of his own. Hidan spun and thrust his spear at Naruto. A quick parry with his tanto pushed it away, and Naruto grabbed both of Hidan's wrists with his chakra tails. Naruto formed a Rasengan and slammed it at the concrete housing the circle, crushing it immediately. You piece of shit, Hidan screamed. You ruined my ritual. Hidan was struggling against Naruto's grip with monstrous strength, but Naruto held on. An explosion suddenly rocked the area. The Nine Tails clone sprung away from the point of impact. At the apex of its jump, it roared, unleashing a shockwave that annihilated the conflagration of earth, wind and fire that was approaching it. When the dust settled, Kakuzu was coming closer, green eyes roving the battlefield. Hidan, you moron, you let the Jinchuriki get away. Kakuzu yelled. Says the guy who couldn't even beat a clone. The clone holding Yugito was long gone, and as much as he wanted to shred Hidan and Kakuzu into tiny pieces, Yugito had been saved. It was time to go. Naruto snarled, revealing his elongated fangs. This is far from over. I'm going to kill you both. That's a promise. Then he reached into his pouch and threw a gray smoke bomb, spreading it wide with a gust of wind. Here's my promise to you, Jinchuriki. Hidan shouted. It doesn't matter how long it takes, or how far you run. I will get you, and you will be sacrificed to Lord Jashin. Naruto ran, putting hordes of clones in between him and the Akatsuki duo. In a flash, the Nine Tails clone was next to him. Just as well, as Kakuzu had cut through the fog with wind chakra, and Hidan was mowing through his clones like a man possessed. What happened? Couldn't beat Kakuzu back there. The Nine Tails clone grinned, and seeing its smile stretch Naruto's own lips to the edges of his face was disturbing. If you released me from my seal, I would have obliterated them both. Naruto snorted. If you say so. He'd seen Kakuzu use 4 different chakra natures with such ease, and Hidan was practically impossible to kill. There was no way Naruto could beat them both at the same time, not as he was and not without proper backup. Is the Two Tails Jinchuriki safe? It asked. Yeah, Naruto said. I'm surprised you care. The last thing I want is for you to have wasted my time and the power I lent you. Naruto grunted, after feeling an influx of new memories. Well, don't worry, We got what we came for. They had reached a rendezvous point with Naruto's clone in a shallow forest several kilometers away from the duo. Yugito was out cold, bleeding out faster than her wounds could be healed. He was about to grab his first aid kit to help her out, but the Nine-Tails clone moved first, wrapping Yugito in a cocoon of orange chakra. To Naruto's surprise, Yugito's wounds began to close up. "How did you that?" Naruto asked. It looked like a more advanced variant of the trick he used to prop up Chio, and it had been done so effortlessly. The Nine-Tails clone chuckled. "Improving on your improvisation is child's play. You did this just to demonstrate your power?" Naruto asked. It crossed its arms. "I see no need to explain myself." Naruto's lip shifted. "Well, whatever the reason, I'm glad we could work together. Thanks for helping me." The Nine-Tails clone glanced at him, its red eyes looking oddly contemplative. Once Yugito's breathing stabilized, the Nine-Tails released the cocoon. Then it dispelled, and Naruto was on his own, the trees and his shadow clone his only companions. Naruto released the chakra shroud and lurched forward, gathering himself on one knee as the adrenaline in his body spilled out. His body ached in 1,000 places, and Hidan and Kakuzu were still at large, but they were safe and Yugito was alive to fight another day. As far as he was concerned, that was a win. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but when the Akatsuki were involved, every single victory counted. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.